Teddy Roosevelt is arguably the biggest and boldest personality to ever enter the White House. Defined by his hypermasculinity and tough guy persona, he was the first celebrity president that the nation had ever had, drawing massive crowds to his public speeches wherever he went. At one of these speeches, late in his political career, someone tried to take his life. This video will summarize the adventurous life of President Theodore Roosevelt, and towards the end, we'll talk about how Teddy was able to deliver a 2-hour speech only minutes after being shot in the chest. So stay tuned. Teddy was known to be as tough as a bull moose, but he didn't start out that way. He had a very sickly childhood that was highlighted by severe asthma. His parents worried that young Theodore would not survive to see adulthood. As a teenager, Teddy decided that the best way to improve his health would be to strengthen his body through grueling physical activity. He began camping, hiking, lifting weights, and even took up boxing. Teddy had fully embraced the strenuous lifestyle and would live this way for the rest of his life. After graduating from Harvard University in 1880, Teddy decided to pursue a political career. He began as a New York State assemblyman, which was defined by him being outspoken against the rampant political corruption of the time and fighting for working people, which was incredibly unusual for a wealthy, well-connected politician of his era. After losing his wife and mother on the same day, Teddy decided to grieve by temporarily leaving politics to become a cattle rancher out west. He moved out to North Dakota and embraced the Western American lifestyle, something that would define his view of what it would mean to be an American. After 2 years out west, Teddy would return home to New York City after a brutal winter killed off most of his cattle. Teddy would remarry and return to politics. Teddy would resume his political career in New York. He would first become president of the New York City Board of Police Commissioners. This era of Teddy's political career would be defined by his relentless battle against police corruption, which was incredibly prevalent in the 1890s. After his time in New York City politics, Teddy would get appointed to be Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Teddy would advocate for liberation of Cuba from Spanish imperial control leading up to the Spanish-American War. Once it became clear that America would have a direct war with Spain in 1898, Teddy left his office as Assistant Secretary of the Navy to take himself onto the battlefield, where he would lead the famed Rough Riders. Emerging victorious from the war, Teddy was celebrated as a war hero. Teddy's newfound fame would help launch his political career to being the next governor of New York. However, the Republican Party was not pleased with his willingness to take on big business monopolies, political machines, and champion labor unions. Teddy became the most popular governor in the country and was something of a celebrity figure by 1900. In order to get him out of power, the Republican Party devised a plan to promote him to the office of vice president. They did this knowing that it wouldn't be politically feasible to force such a popular figure out of the governor's mansion. The idea was that it would take advantage of his celebrity politician status, but strip him of any actual political power, as the vice president is a figurehead without much political power. However, this plan to take away political power from Teddy would completely backfire on the Republicans. What they didn't count on was that President William McKinley would die only 7 months into his term after winning the 1900 presidential election. So on September 14th, 1901, Teddy Roosevelt would be sworn into office as President of the United States, much to the dismay of his own party and powerful business leaders of the time. Teddy's presidency would become a defining 7 years of the progressive era in American politics. It was during this time where most of modern U.S. antitrust legislation was put into law. The power of labor unions increased, direct federal taxation was implemented, and Teddy's conservationist ideology led to the establishment of the U.S. National Park System. After sailing to re-election in 1904, Teddy proclaimed the night of his victory that he, like many presidents before him, would not seek a third term in the 1908 election. Although presidential term limits did not exist yet, every president up to this point had honored the maximum 2-term tradition set by George Washington. By 1908, Teddy began to deeply regret his declaration that he would not seek a third term, as he did not want to give up the presidency, as he felt his political agenda was unfinished. But being a man of his word, Teddy did leave office. He had handpicked his successor, his own Secretary of War, William Howard Taft would take the office of the presidency in 1909. Teddy would take this time to travel and explore abroad. However, Teddy would become increasingly frustrated with his chosen successor's actions as president. Taft did not govern as progressively as Roosevelt did, and the final straw for Teddy was likely when Taft decided to privatize 3 million acres of federal national parkland, which prompted Teddy to run in the Republican primary against President Taft in 1912. Although Teddy received far more votes from the public in the 1912 Republican primary, the primary system was incredibly undemocratic at the time, and party leaders viewed votes from the public as suggestions on who they should nominate for president. The Republican Party decided to make Taft their nominee, despite the fact that Teddy had received nearly twice as many votes. Not accepting the result, Teddy created the Progressive Party and ran as a third-party candidate against Republican President Taft and Democratic nominee Woodrow Wilson. While on his way to a speech in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on October 14, 1912, Teddy was shot in the chest by a man named John Schrank. Teddy's steel glasses case, as well as his folded-up 50-page speech that were in his chest pocket, helped slow down the bullet. Teddy quickly coughed into his hands and concluded that because he was not coughing up blood, the bullet had not gone deep enough to hit his heart or lungs. This assessment would end up being correct. After establishing that he was going to be all right, Teddy then faced his assassin and requested that no harm be done to him by the surrounding crowd. He then proceeded to talk to him and asked him why he had attempted to assassinate him. Receiving no answer, Teddy ordered John Schrank to be arrested and taken into custody. Despite pleading guilty, Schrank was actually found not guilty on account of being insane. Schrank believed that former deceased President William McKinley had visited him in a dream and asked him to kill Teddy in revenge. He was committed to a mental institution for the rest of his life. Defying the advice of his advisors to immediately rush to the hospital, Teddy proceeded to give his 2-hour-long speech. He famously started the speech by saying, "Friends, I shall ask you to be as quiet as possible. I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." Teddy would receive treatment for the gunshot after the speech, and after administering x-rays, his doctors decided it would be best if the bullet was not removed, fearing that it could cause him to bleed out. The bullet remained lodged inside of Teddy's chest for the rest of his life. Despite his triumphant survival of the assassination attempt, Teddy Roosevelt would lose the 1912 presidential election to Democrat Woodrow Wilson. However, he did beat Republican President William Taft, and his third-party bid remains the most successful presidential third-party attempt in U.S. history. Teddy was very distraught after losing the election and left to explore South America following his defeat. At the outbreak of World War I, Teddy strongly believed that the U.S. should get involved and was critical of President Woodrow Wilson's neutral stance for the first several years of the war. When the U.S. entered the war in 1917, Teddy once again wanted to lead troops as a soldier in the war, but he was turned down on account of his declining health. His sons would fight in the war and fought bravely to make their father proud. His youngest and favorite son, Quentin, would die in 1918 as a fighter pilot. The loss absolutely devastated Teddy and may have contributed to his own death a few months later. Teddy died in his sleep on January 6, 1919. Vice President Thomas R. Marshall said of Teddy, "Death had to take Roosevelt sleeping, for if he had been awake, there would have been a fight." I would like to thank everyone who watched the entire video. If you enjoyed what you just watched, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment, letting me know you subscribed and what topics you would like to see. I plan to keep making more videos talking about unusual historical figures and events.